Of all the creepy creatures that Magic the Gathering has, from Consuming Aberration to Phyrexian Obliterator, I think it's a testament to the art and creature design for Innistrad that a real-world animal somehow ranks as one of the most creepy and disgusting. Maybe it's the scaled-up teeth, maybe it's the slimy body, or the creepy little offspring with the round razor maws, or maybe, just maybe, it's that it's a slug the size of a freaking Elder Dragon. Welcome to the Uncommon Commander. Today we're building Toxrill the Corrosive. This legendary creature slug horror costs 5 generic and 2 black mana for a total of 7, and has a robust 7/7 body. It also comes with 4 abilities that work largely in tandem. The first is a triggered ability that says, at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. This is relevant for its second ability. This one is a passive ability that reads, creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And that is relevant for its next ability, another triggered ability that reads, whenever a creature you don't control with slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. Wow, so he's going to make everything smaller on each end step, not just your own, and when those things get so small that they die, you'll get to create a slug creature. But wait, that's not all, because Toxrill also has pay a blue and a black mana and sacrifice a slug, draw a card. That's right, he's a 7/7 creature, a token generator, a constant board wipe, and on top of all of that, those abilities feed back into him to make him a card draw engine as well. I guess if you're paying 7 mana, you'd better be getting something good for it. And it looks like with Toxrill, you most certainly are. I've always loved the Dimir colors, but I'm not really huge on mill as a win condition, so I don't have many Dimir decks. My previous favorite Dimir commander was Silumgar the Drifting Death, so that should give you some insight into why I love Toxrill. In my Silumgar deck, I'm all about wiping the board over and over while slamming down, air quotes, dragons. In this Toxrill deck, we're going to go about it a bit differently though. Toxrill himself will wipe the board once he's on the battlefield, but leading into that, we're going to employ a bit of a group slug style of play with a few options for politics. The goal of this deck is to make sure your opponents have creatures, try to get them to swing those creatures at each other, if they're swinging them at all, and then make them pay for each creature that dies with their life. I'm definitely going to be building this one out in paper, and as such, I've kept it pretty budget, getting this one down to a $75 budget, including its commander. All told, it was $74.45 on the day this was created, if you're buying it from TCG Player. And if you do decide to buy this deck, or cards that you see in the deck, please consider using my TCG Player links in the video description. Doing so helps support the continued creation of this content. Thank you. Okay, our goal in this deck is going to be to set up our board as quickly as possible with the knowledge that Toxrill is our primary win condition, but can't come out until somewhere between the mid and the late game. Because of this, we don't want to put down lands that enter the battlefield tapped if we cannot all avoid it. So you see our color fixing lands are going to be Command Tower, Choked Estuary, Dark Water Catacombs, Tainted Isle, and Myriad Landscape, which is our only tap land among these. Our utility lands also have an overall focus on not coming into play tapped, and these are Bojuka Bog, Scavenger Grounds, Encroaching Wastes, Field of Ruin, and Rogue's Passage. Again, we have one here that does enter the battlefield tapped, and that's Bojuka Bog. 2 tap lands out of 38 total lands isn't going to slow us down too often. Our basic lands are going to be 14 islands and 14 swamps. This part of the video is usually dedicated to ramp, and that's still the case today, but today we've got to focus on the velocity of our deck, and that means we'll be seeing more than just our normal ramp. Still, we do have some normal ramp spells in here, and those are Wayfarer's Bauble, Prismatic Lens, and Arcane Signet. Our cards that I would like to term as Velocity Ramp are here specifically to get Toxrill out as quickly as possible. Each of these spells makes at least 2 mana for us. These are the Rites, Dark Ritual, Bubbling Muck, and High Tide. We also have the Rocks and Dorks, Soul Ring, Apprentice Wizard, Worn Power Stone, Basalt Monolith, Hedron Archive, and Thran Dynamo. The quickest I've ever gotten Toxrill out in playtesting was on turn 3, getting a Swamp and a Soul Ring on turn 1, and a Swamp and a Basalt Monolith on turn 2, then casting Toxrill with all those on turn 3. That's pretty early in the game for a 7 mana creature, and it doesn't give us any room to protect it from removal, but it's one heck of an early entrance. Of course, in order to maximize the damage Toxrill will do, we'll want to prepare the battlefield for him a bit, so these next sections will touch on that. One great way to do that is to make sure your opponents have creatures, even the creatureless decks. To do this, we'll be giving them tokens through these cards: Slaughter Specialist, Curse of Disturbance, Haunted Phantasm, a Crowan Horse, Clackbridge Troll, and Infernal Genesis. There are some really powerful options I couldn't fit in here due to their price, but I'll make sure to mention them in the upgrades section for those who do like this strategy. Now, Toxrill is a fantastic payoff card for those tokens that we just gave away, but we want this deck to still be able to win without Toxrill if we need it to. So I've included some payoff cards as well. These are Shadows of the Past, Falkenrath Noble, Dreadhound, Massacre Worm, Sadistic Glee, and Necrosynthesis. Those last couple of enchantments can power up Toxrill to go for a commander damage win, or can be put on one of your more evasive creatures to make for one heck of a beater. Massacre Worm will drain your opponents out, but he's also nice when you need a board wipe against a tiny tokens army that just got a bit too wide. In a similar vein, we also have 3 fun Battle Cruiser cards. These are Endless Whispers, Grave Betrayal, and Limdul the Necromancer. Endless Whispers is probably the most suspect one here, but it does ensure that your opponents will never run out of creatures to kill. It's a risky play, but I think it could be loads of fun at the right table. It may seem like we can skimp on card draw for this deck, what with our commander being a card draw engine itself, but that logic is a trap, and that's because our commander costs 7 mana. As I mentioned, it's a mid to late game commander, so we can't rely on it for card draw. We also shouldn't put too many spells in that only draw in synergy with Toxrill. Because of this, we're missing notable card draw spells like Dark Prophecy, Plumb the Forbidden, and even Rush of Knowledge, though that wouldn't be a terrible choice because we do have some other high mana value creatures in this deck. Instead, we're running Betrayal, Everwatching Threshold, Curse of Verbosity, Infernal Offering, and the spells that don't draw but instead put cards into your hand: Epiphany at the Drownyard, Fact or Fiction, and Moonlight Bargain. These should be our primary card advantage spells for the part of the game before we cast Toxrill. All of that said, we do actually have a few cards that do synergize with our commander as well. These are Morbid Opportunist, Kel's Fight Fixer, and the recursion enchantment, Malevolent Awakening. Upon reflection, I think Morbid Opportunist is actually pretty good even without Toxrill, as long as we're gifting people lots of small tokens. By this point in the game, we should be able to safely cast Toxrill. The problem is, he's not a snail, he's a slug. This, of course, means he doesn't have a shell to protect him, so that job is gonna fall to us. So we're running these protection cards: Feign Death, Undying Malice, Shade's Form, Robe of Mirrors, Alexi's Cloak, Dark Privilege, and Blessing of Leeches. I actually wanted to keep all of the protection cards at 1 or 2 mana, but Shade's Form gives Toxrill the ability to Voltron if left unblocked, thanks to its black fire-breathing ability. And as for Blessing of Leeches, well, as a man who has access to Google, I know leeches and slugs are 2 different animals, but I still felt like it was a flavor win, so I kept it. This is a lot of protection spells, but we need to focus this much on protection because Toxrill will be a removal magnet. Nobody likes Toxrill, except for you, the guy who controls it. Our slug is the size of a dragon, so I think this would be a fun time to make our opponent's dragons the size of slugs. Ha 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 ha! To aid in this, we're running Mass Diminish, Polymorphous Jest, and Sudden Spoiling. These are going to act sort of like a board wipe against big creatures that aren't ready to die to our slime counters yet. It's sneaky, and your friends definitely won't like seeing their creatures die, but it's funny enough that they probably won't be too mad at you. Of course, we should also have removal in place that doesn't rely on Toxrill, or at least not completely. For removal, we're leaning hard into spells that will give our opponents a token, or some other creature, as a replacement. These are Pondufy, Rapid Hybridization, Resculpt, Hour of Need, Ovenomancer, which has some of my favorite art in the game on it, Raven Form, Transmogrifying Wand, Polymorph, and the board wipe for hands, Awaken the Erstwhile. Polymorph can be great for removing an opponent's threats, but it's also really good at removing one of your own slugs and allowing you to find something significantly better than a 1/1 slug. I also want to talk about Awaken the Erstwhile for a second. This thing is a great card in discard decks, and in zombie decks too, but it's also nice for us here. I like leading into casting Toxrill by casting this spell the turn before. It severely limits the chance that anyone's going to have a counterspell or removal in their hands, and it will give your opponents lots of small zombies for Toxrill to kill. Once they're dead, you'll gain a bunch of slugs and be in a great spot to refill your hand with Toxrill. It's like they're made for each other. Alright, we should probably discuss some reasonable and not so reasonable upgrades now. First up, we have the Mass Land Destruction combo of Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Corrosive. This is already a deck that's going to lead to some real feels bad moments, and Corrosive is only going to make that worse. You've been warned. A counterspell that I really liked but couldn't add in due to the budget was Swan Song. Similarly, I had to cut Amph and Mutineer. These were both pretty painful cuts. I also didn't add in a couple of right-like spells due to budget. Those are Cabal Ritual and Gilded Lotus. It might be useful at times to be able to get mana of any color. A really cool card that missed the cut was Cemetery Puka. This cut was all about the budget. I personally think this would be a really sweet way of getting a payoff from killing creatures with Toxrill. I guess I did promise to mention earlier that I would mention some additional token generators. The ones that I cut were Forbidden Orchard, Hunted Horror, and Tombstone Stairwell. When it comes to Tombstone Stairwell, I'm not actually sure that the timing works, so just check with a judge or someone smarter than me before adding that expensive card into this deck. Forbidden Orchard, however, is fantastic. Finally, I cut an entire suite of cards. This one kinda hurt because it was the basis for the deck at first. These are Helm of the Host, Sekishima of 1,000 Faces, Spark Double, and Mirror Gallery, along with a bunch of other clones. Cloning Toxrill at least once is super powerful because it speeds your deck up by a factor of 4. Each of your opponent's boards will be cleared of everything except medium-sized or smaller creatures with just a single end step. It sure would have been sweet, if only Magic didn't cost all of the money. But with that, I think it's time to finish up this deck. We've got 5 more cards squirming into the deck, and I'll present them to you in a segment that I used no imagination in naming
The Final Countdown!
In today's Final Countdown, I've taken what I view to be the best card out of most of our major categories. At number 5, the first category I took a card out of was the Protection Spells. This card is Diplomatic Immunity, and it doesn't just protect the creature it's enchanting with Shroud, it protects itself with Shroud too. This level of hard to interact with is worth its spot on our list. But we have even better cards ahead. At number 4, we're running a Removal spell. It can be a spot removal, or it can be a board wipe. It's also an exile spell because screw white. This card is Curse of Swine. Not only is it super flexible, and not only does it remove indestructible creatures, it also creates pigs for our opponents. Pigs that Toxrill's going to turn into bacon. Yum yum. At number 3, we've taken a card from our effects that make our opponent's creatures small and remove all of their abilities. Okay, that's not really a major section, but it was a fun one, and this one is one of the most fun of them all. This card is Sludge Monster. This goopy friend of Toxrill's puts a slime counter on another target creature whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks. A creature that will quickly die thanks to losing all of its abilities and becoming a 2/2. That it can prepare the battlefield for Toxrill with a bunch of slime counters is just an added bonus. Taken from our payoff cards, number 2 is going to turn Toxrill into some kind of a freaky Elder Dragon. This card is Fallen Ideal, and it gives Toxrill flying. It also turns the slugs Toxrill creates into Voltron fuel, as you can sacrifice a slug to Fallen Ideal in order to give the creature its enchanting +2/+1. It takes almost nothing at all to get Toxrill into 2-shot territory at that rate, and it's not outlandish to get it into 1-shot territory as well. No one ever expects their death to come from a giant flying slug, but here we are. Finally, we're down to number 1. This is a card that isn't actually from any one category, because I wasn't sure how to categorize it in the first place. It could be considered card advantage, or maybe a payoff card. Really though, it's a win condition. This card is Demon of Dark Schemes. It's got a 5/5 body, is a board wipe with wings, and will allow you to bring a creature from any graveyard under your control for every 4 creatures that die. And trust me, there's going to be a lot of dying going on. Well, that's our toxic little deck of the day. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like. I'd also love to see you subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special thanks to my patrons at this time. Those people donate money to me so I can keep this thing going, so they deserve the praise. I want to mention before going that I just closed on my new house. A house that needs a lot of work, so it may be a while before the next video. Sorry. Now then, I'm going to get out of here for now, but you guys all enjoy yourselves and try not to be too mean to everyone at your table. Bye bye!